Okay, so my daughter really likes unicorns, and for this project, you're going to need acrylic paint and a canvas with a paintbrush. Now you can see here, I'm barely dipping my brush into the paint and I'm just swiping a little bit onto the canvas, kind of in a stripes streaking motion. You don't want to cover the entire canvas, just do it lightly. You'll want to leave a little bit of white. You'll see that we'll fill this in later. So I started with a dark purple color. You can start with any color base. This will be part of your background. I chose to do pink and purple. And you just continue swiping across in this sweeping motion until you get, most of the white covered on top of your canvas. Don't forget to be careful around the edges so that you don't leave too much white on your canvas. You can see I'm going back over. There's really no right or wrong way to do this. Just kind of cover a lot of it until you think it looks good. Next, you're going to take your second color and you're going to do the same thing, but focus on the areas that are really still white on your canvas. You can lay the second paint, like I'm doing with the pink, over top of your base coat, but make sure you fill in a lot of that white area. So you can see that I'm painting the pink paint and I'm focusing on these white areas and then kind of swiping the rest of the paint just over anywhere else. You can see, don't forget to do your edges again. It doesn't have to be 100% colored, but you're going to want it to be pretty well covered with not a lot of white showing through. Make sure that your paint isn't too dark. You don't want to full-on swab paint everywhere, so keep it just real light and wipe off your excess paint onto your paint container if you need. Okay, so before I actually start drawing on my painting, I kind of sketch a little bit out on a notebook paper. You can see this unicorn here. I drew it in pencil. I just freehand drew it. It's not very difficult. The head is kind of like an elongated oval. And I literally just drew this with a pencil directly over the paint onto the canvas once the paint had dried. So I did a really light coat, which you couldn't really see. And here, I'm darkening the pencil so that I can actually see it when I go to paint. The paint will go over this pencil, so you don't even have to erase it. You can just paint right over it, and you'll see as we go through this video that it isn't a big deal. So make sure that you darken, make sure you add all the features that you want, especially if you're really not great at art like me. I'm not really great at just freehand coming up with these amazing art designs. This is really for basic videos, and kids can even do this with this generic oval shape and then just a line down for the chest of the unicorn. The first thing I did after I drew it all out in pencil was I took my white paint, my white acrylic paint, and for me it's easier to apply the paint around the edges so that I kind of have my border and then I can paint in. So you'll notice that here I'm painting up the neck of the unicorn on the line, and then I'll fill in everything else very quickly. Now because I'm painting so much white, since it's a unicorn, I did do 2 or 3 coats of paint. So you kind of just do whatever you think looks good for you. I felt after one coat, since I paint kind of thin, that I just felt there was too much pink and purple kind of showing through and I didn't want it to look so streaky. Again, you can see that I am following the outline of my pencil. And the pencil does not show through on the white paint. I know some people maybe will say to erase it, but I just took the easy route and painted right over the top of it. An easy way to do the unicorn too is just to do the oval face and then to just draw with a black Sharpie later a mouth on it if you don't want to do a little jut on the lip like I did. You could literally just do a big oval and then a line down. Now make sure when you're painting this white paint over and filling in your pencil outline that you don't forget where your special features are on your unicorn. You don't want to forget by the end that you have nostrils and that you have an eyelid with eyelashes or sections of the ear to fill in. This is another reason that I just kind of sketch out my basic general idea of what I want to do on a piece of paper so that after I'm done painting, I can come back and look and see what other features that I might have wanted to fill in. Now, if you're really great at art and you're great at just freehand designing and coming up with things, chances are you're probably not watching this video, but you can totally just put your first sketch on your canvas if you would like to. For me, it's easier again to just have a draft so that I can not feel like I'm going to mess up my artwork. So you'll see here now that I'm finishing that first coat of white paint on the unicorn. I make sure to get around the edges so that there's no pink and purple peeking out through the back of the unicorn. And I just try to even it out a little bit. I let that dry for a little bit, and then I just add another coat on top. It only takes a few minutes. By the third coat, you might need more than a few minutes to let dry. But it really doesn't take long to just run another coat over the top of it. Here you can see that's 3 coats. Now, I chose to do a metallic paint for the horn. I'm not sure how I liked it in the long run, but you will see here, I just painted it in. Because it's a metallic bronze, and I tend to paint it very thin, you could see a lot of the purple shining through. So you will notice that I do put a second coat on here, and I really glob it on, so I took a lot of time to let this one dry. In the end, I wasn't super thrilled with the color. I probably would have gone with a brighter brassy color instead of such a dark copper color. But my daughter's only 4. She won't know the difference, and she's just going to be excited that I painted her a unicorn. Here you can see that I have the globby metallic paint, and I made sure to just leave it really globby. There's a little bit of extra texture in there. So we're going to let this here dry. Now once it's dry, I recommend taking a Sharpie marker and just outlining the outside of the unicorn to give it some extra definition and to really make it stand out more. You'll definitely want to make sure that your paint is extremely dry, otherwise you're going to start pulling paint into your Sharpie marker. Now you don't have to do this, but as I go through the outline, you'll see that this really gives an extra pop to the unicorn. You can use a black paint marker if you wish, but I find with the paint markers that you have to press a little bit harder, and I was afraid to scratch up any of the background for my unicorn. You can also take a paintbrush, a thin paintbrush, and paint black around it, but I found that for me it was easier to control a Sharpie marker than to have to continually be dipping into a paintbrush. If you want, you can also add swipes across the horn to kind of give it a spiral look, but I just chose to leave mine as is. Now, if this is hanging up on a wall, you're probably going to be looking at it from a distance. So you can see in this video, for the most part, you can't really see where I'm picking up and where I'm leaving off on my Sharpie marker outline. Unless you look at it very close, you're really not going to be able to tell. It just gives a little bit more of a pop to the unicorn. Now don't forget, before you put away your Sharpie marker, to go ahead and outline the mouth, the eyelid with the eyelashes, and of course, don't forget the nose. Next, you'll want to make sure that you fill in a little bit of pink into the unicorn's ear. I used a very thin paintbrush for this and just kind of went with a triangle shape. Again, it doesn't have to be exact. The next part was for the unicorn hair. I chose a lot of really bright, retro, almost pastel colors. And this actually I had set aside for weeks because I just felt like I was at a point where I would mess up the hair. And as you can see, it's really not difficult. More mind over matter. You just dip different size paintbrushes into each color and just start with a squiggly motion around the horn, back up the unicorn. You can see my squiggly lines here, and just continue overlapping them. I did about 1 or 2 strokes per color, and then I just kept going back through the color scheme, and you'll notice as I go through the hair that it begins blending together, and it really looks pretty nice by the end. I was really afraid to mess this part up. I was happy with how my unicorn head looked. You can see I'm adding a little bit of bangs, a little swipe. And once I got started, it wasn't as nerve-wracking as I was making it out to be. There really isn't a wrong way to do it here. I found just continually adding swipes of color and squiggly lines made it better. And I just kept adding color until I was happy with how the unicorn's hair looked. Now, don't forget to make sure that there's hair covering that back neck area where your brush tends to run out of paint. So you may need to add a little bit there at the end. Just like that. And there it is. Here is a unicorn that's very simple to draw and do yourself, and kids can do this as well, and then proudly hang in their room or give to their friends as a gift. Thank you, and make sure you subscribe.